this is going to be the first hand. Again, this is a concentration here on missed value. Now, some of the angles here are a little bit strange, or it's a little bit different from Live of the Bike and Poker Night in America angles. So sometimes I can get a little bit caught up, or I might be a little bit confused with, who is in what seat, etc., etc. You might see some blurred hands here right now as well, and I'm going to flow through the action as best as I can. Now here we have a raise from seat number 5, Cobra, and the button, Robert, who is in seat 9. So here we're talking about these angles here. This guy in seat 5, opposite to the dealer, has raised to 13, and Robert here has just called. So we've got a raise and we have a call. And we're going to see a flop, and you can see it is 8-3-8 with a couple of spades. You can see here that Robert has pocket queens. So he decides to flat here with pocket queens. This is certainly something that I would not recommend at the smaller stakes of Live No Limit. I will commonly do this against early position raisers in my regular 5-10 game at Commerce, against players that I think are pretty good players, where they're opening wide, and I feel like I might get them to value own themselves if I just call down pre-flop with a big pocket pair, and then depending on what comes, I might play it fast, and they might think that I might be doing it with a draw. Those types of dynamics at 5-5 and below don't really exist. 5-5 and below are really going to be like 85, 90% value. So if I've got queens here and this guy makes it 13 with about a $500 stack, which is almost 200 big blinds, I don't want to bump him out of the pot, but I certainly would raise him to at least 35, 40 with a very, very high frequency if I was playing small stakes, no limit. Now, we don't see the preflop raiser's hand. We are playing from Robert's perspective. And Cobra here checks. So we're in seat 9 on the button. Cobra checks it over to us, and we bet 16 into 30, which is about a half pot size bet. I would err towards betting a little bit larger than that. I think that I might bet 20 or 25. Nowadays, one of the things that has changed with the game is that even recreational players might not say check fold ace king, ace jack, something like that in this particular spot. I think when the preflop raiser is heads up against you as a field flat caller and he checks, he's not just going to check fold all the time on a paired board. So I might choose a little bit of a larger sizing, especially with this type of stack depth. Now the turn here is the 4 of hearts, and we're going to see a somewhat peculiar play here. Again, we're playing out of Robert in seat 9. The preflop raiser check called on the flop, and now he is going to lead on the turn. So he's going to bet 40, which isn't necessarily a small bet. It's about a 2/3 pot size bet. And then, one of the things I'm going to start to think about is, well, what is this guy doing this with? If I flat called with queens, which I wouldn't normally do in this spot, he's raised from basically what is under the gun 2. How often is he slow playing something big? You don't usually see somebody check call with aces, check call, with kings. If he's opening from that early position and he's a standard player, he doesn't have a whole lot of 8s in his range. So I think that we fare to have the best hand here a lot. But the question is it better to raise here? Is it better to just call here, right? I mean, what type of range is he check calling and then, leading out with when we have queens? He might have picked up a backdoor flush draw with his ace highs. It's probably rare that he has spades. Like I said, it's a very, very awkward type of scenario. And more often than not, I might actually pump this one up here again, make a small raise. It's all about sizing. Make it 95, make it 100. He's never going to really be able to come back over the top. You don't have to worry about it all that often. It's barely even worth talking about a scenario where the preflop raiser opens from +2, we call, he check calls flop, he bets a rag turn, we raise, and then he 3-bets. It's so rare, we don't even have to necessarily think about it. Now, we can just call here in this spot, but we certainly have to be ready to pound, and I mean pound blank rivers when checked to make it look like we busted out on spades. Because one of the things here is that if we bet and just call turn, we are basically announcing, even to the most amateurish of players, that we have an unfull, that we don't have an unfull eight here. Excuse me, is what I mean is that we don't have an eight. So if the river comes out a blank and the dude checks to us, we can bet, and we're going to get called by all kinds of hands because the draws basically have bricked out. Like I said, I don't really know what to think about his range if I'm in Robert's spot. What types of hands does a guy check call lead turn? Because I see it so rarely. And again, I am open to what you guys think at the lower stakes about this type of line. But I still think that Queen's fair to be the best hand way more than a majority of the time. And I think that there is certainly a case to be made for raising turn, making it 95 or 100, and betting a lot of blank rivers here too. Now Robert decides to just call, and the river brings in a backdoor flush. And now Cobra in seat 5 is going to check. So we have a scenario where this guy raised pre-flop from under the gun 2. We decided to play a slow play pre, which again, I'm not recommending at this level. We just call. He checks the flop, we bet, which is fine. I think Robert used a little bit of smaller sizing than I would have. Cobra calls. Cobra leads turn now. Like I said, super non-standard. Something that I can't even remember the last time a guy check called and then led a rag turn. It's very, very awkward and very, very non-standard. One of the types of hands that I would have thought that might have done that would have been like an ace high with picking up the nut flush draw. But when he checks the river now with the 10 of hearts, it's just very, very, very rare that he's ever going to have that type of hand because people are going to check back so much. So what do we lose to here now with queens? We lose to like a trickily played 8. Again, he's raising from under the gun 2, so it's pretty rare that he's going to have that type of hand. We would expect him to bet out with a lot of flush draws here. So, he might not have anything, but the fact that he checks the river means he doesn't have a backdoor flush, and I don't think he's full. And, I'm going to drive this point home again, over and over again, over the next 6 or 7 weeks when we do these types of videos, that the propensity for people to check raise bluff the river is basically 0. The frequency is 0 at these types of levels. So betting the river is almost a free roll, because if we bet and somebody check raises, it's just it's almost never a bluff, almost never a situation where we can call given the pot odds. So we have to take advantage of these types of situations because this level is all about value. Now, could we be value owning ourselves against a hand like aces or kings? It's possible, but this is really where I want to make a bet that has to do with the frequency of I'm getting called. It's unfortunate that the river brings a backdoor heart draw. If the river was an offsuit 10 and the guy checked, we would 100% know that we had the best hand. And I would have figured that the guy might have a hand like 5s, 6s, 7s, 9s, something like that. Here, he might check some stronger hands because the backdoor flush comes in. But, in reality, I think that I would probably bet 65 or 75 and try to get looked up by some type of pair. But like you'll often see, Robert just checks it back. So he misses value pre-flop. Now, we don't necessarily know if Cobra would have called, pre-flop with what his hand is here, which is ace-4 offsuit. But he misses a little bit value pre-flop with a 3-betting. Probably sized his bet too small on the flop. Didn't raise the turn. And if he doesn't raise the turn, he's got to make up for some of that lost value on the river. I think the river is a must bet as played. I probably would have played every single street differently.